Hello you amazing people, welcome back to another channel. Today's video we're going to be diving into the subreddit r/ProRevenge, so buckle up because it's going to be a long ass video. I just want to say an extra thank you to everyone who's been subscribing lately. You guys are fucking awesome and I appreciate you. If you like this kind of content and feel like subscribing, I would love to have you here. And let's start the video. My former employer was stiffing me on money. While trying to get what he owed me, I kinda sorta ruined his marriage and probably his whole life. Posted by user /Bartolos Sweat Socks. Okay. I don't know that this actually counts as revenge because I was honestly just trying to get money I was owed. I wasn't trying to drop a nuclear bomb on the guy's life in the process. That's what ended happening though. And I was told that my Redditor brothers and sisters here might like this story, so here it is. Some years back, I ended up doing work for this guy I'll call Dick. It was just a side job for extra money, not my career or anything. Dick had a small business. It's boring, I won't get into any of that. Before me, he had one other employee, so I made two. Just 2 employees. That's how small a business it was. The thing was, Dick ran his business like shit. I didn't know the specifics of his financial situation, but based on where he lived, the car he drove, etc., he was doing pretty well. Maybe it was inheritance or whatever, I didn't know, but his situation clearly wasn't due to this business, which again, he ran like shit. In fact, he ran the business like such utter shit that after about 6 months after I started doing work for him, the business wasn't making money anymore. So instead of regular payments like usual, the other employee and I had to start asking where our money was before it showed up. Then the payments started getting more and more behind. Eventually, I was owed around $500. Then one day, the other employee tells me, I'm done, he owes me like $5,000 and I'm not going to keep working for nothing. I was like, whoa, shit, because I had no idea he was owed that much. The trouble with pay clearly went back farther than I knew. So Dick ended up coming to me and said, look, I owe the other guy money and I need to pay him. Do you mind if I get him all paid up, which means I gotta hold off on your pay for a month or 2? But once he's paid off, I swear I'll make it up to you. Because I'm a fucking idiot and because I felt bad about the first employee who was a good dude, I said, fine, go ahead. So I didn't get paid for a while, which upped my total owed to about $1,500. Then eventually I heard from the other employee and he told me Dick finally paid him everything he was owed. Great, I thought, now it's my turn. LOL. A few weeks after, I heard the other employee was paid up, which I only ever heard from him, never from Dick. Dick told me he was closing the business, which didn't shock me at all. Surely it had been losing money for quite a while. I go, okay, so where's my money? And I told him exactly how much he owed me. I got back, well, the thing is, I can't pay you now, but this went on for a year. I looked into what my steps were legally, but I'd have to file something in small claims court and it's only $1,500. And having to get a lawyer would probably eat up most of it. So I just kept bugging Dick about the money. I was like, hey, pay me $25 a month, I don't care. But he wouldn't even do that. He told me about how he's got to go through all his stuff to dissolve the business and everything, and he'll pay me as soon as he can. And overall, he just avoided taking any responsibility. At one point, he said something about how people were currently suing him. Big shock, and he'd get me in contact with his lawyers if I wanted so my debt could be added or something. I said fine, give me their names and numbers. He never did. Eventually I realized that nothing was ever going to come of this and I was just going to be out the money I was owed. But while I had been doing the work for him, I had emailed back and forth with his wife maybe a dozen times. To this day, I had never met his wife. Never ever spoken with her. Just communicated through text and email. She seemed really nice and told me something like, Dick won't tell you this, but he doesn't really know what he's doing with this business, and I know you've been a big help. So I just got the idea that, you know what? This next email I send Dick about trying to get my money, I'm going to include his wife on it too, so she knows how much he sucks. I heard back from her almost right away, and she was like, I am so sorry about this, please keep me posted on what happens. Then suddenly, magically, Dick started talking about working out a payment schedule. He started sending me $100 every month, and the debt got down to $1,000. I figured his wife must have got on his ass about it, and I laughed to myself about how whipped old Dick was. But then the money stopped coming again. The excuses started coming again. One day he told me that he just was going through a hard time financially right now, which I knew was bullshit. He still had the nice car, the nice house, etc. But it's not like I had a printout of his bank records that I could call him out on. On the exact same day he told me that though, I was watching the local pro team's baseball game later that night, and who did I see but Dick? In great seats no less. Second row, right down in front, just off to the right. Every time they zoomed in on a right-handed player, you could clearly see him, and this was in September, in the midst of a playoff race. So those tickets were not cheap. It's no Perry Mason moment, but the thought of replying to his "I'm having financial trouble" email with a picture of him in those seats, and me being like, "Yeah, I can see that," gave me a raging justice boner. So I was looking for a good image of him to use, but every time I paused the video, his face got somewhat out of focus. It was clearly him if you watched the video, but I needed a still image that was also clearly him. Then in the 7th inning, a foul ball got caught about 2 rows behind him, and they zoomed in on that area of the crowd. And there was Dick, clear as day, sitting with his wife. I'm thinking, aha, I got you now, motherfucker. The next morning, I replied to his prior message by sending that screen capture to him. I figured even if I didn't get my money, at least I'd had that one sweet moment of satisfaction of busting him there. Then, almost at the last second, I decided to send it to his wife too, just so she knew what was going on and how the money had stopped again. And remembering how quickly Dick's tune had changed that first time, I'd included her. I even thought that maybe her being in the picture would make her light an even hotter fire under his ass this time. So I sent it, but I didn't hear anything back from either of them. 2-3 days went by and nothing. Then I heard from the other employee I'd worked with. He goes, "You hear about Dick?" I said, "No, what?" His wife kicked him out and filed for divorce. I'm like, holy fuck, no way. Yeah, apparently she caught him cheating on her. I thought, I wonder how. You know what would be crazy? What if that wasn't his wife in the picture, and I'd sent her that picture, and LOL, no. No way. He was probably talking about the divorce when he mentioned having financial trouble. That would make sense. The divorce was already in the works before the picture. Yeah, there's literally no chance whatsoever that I inadvertently told his wife that he was cheating on her. LOL, I mean, come on, right? Nope, that was literally what had happened. The woman at the game with him, not his wife. Apparently his wife knew the woman though, and knew that Dick had lied about where he was that night and who he was with. And a shitstorm of epic proportions quickly followed. I ended up emailing her not long after and being like, hello there. I've been hearing some things and I can't help thinking that that picture I sent might have been part of this. And she said she'd been meaning to contact me. She thanked me. She said she'd wanted out of the marriage anyway, and she said she might need me as a witness. I didn't know what for. Are divorces like trials? But anyway, she paid me the $1,000 he owed me plus another $500 on top. I don't know if she thought he still owed me $1,500 or if she purposely gave me extra, and I didn't have to be a witness for anything, which was good. Also, Dick's nice car and nice house and all, his wife was the one with the money, meaning that he no longer has it. They got divorced and he moved away, and I have no idea what became of him. Honestly, considering everything that happened, I feel kinda bad for him, but then I remember there's no reason he couldn't have just paid me. Seriously, why not just pay? He had the money, I just chalk it up to Dick having a lot of negative karma coming his way, and I played a part in catching it up with him. Torment me for years and then take my brother's best friend away? Be ready for our revenge. Posted by user/kindly offer. I will preface this by saying that this story is long, and I was not the mastermind to all of the revenge that follows, but I did play a crucial role and feel as though I need to explain my reasons for doing so. I grew up in a single-parent family. My mom, me, and my older sister, who for the story's sake I will call Lilith. Lilith is 4 years older than me, so the main reason I believe she was the way she was because she grew up an only child with both our parents spoiling her and giving her everything she wanted. Then I came along, and she wasn't the baby anymore. Then when I was 2, my parents divorced. My dad moved away and my mom was left alone with us. My sister was, and still is, a grade A bitch. When I was growing up, she used to bully me relentlessly. She would call me names, break my stuff, blame my parents' divorce on me, and even physically abuse me until I got old enough to hit back. At school, she used to get all her friends to bully me as well, and because a bunch of older kids were always cornering me, calling me fat and ugly, I never had any friends. No one wanted to be anywhere near me because of her, and she always made a point of letting me know just how much better than me she was. When I was younger, I believed she was better. She was prettier, wore better clothes, had a ton of friends, and was into girly stuff and makeup and fashion, while I was still in my teddy bear Barbie stage. You could just tell me that this is all stupid kid stuff, but it only got worse as we got older. By the time she was 16, I was just turning 12 and the bullying had never ceased. Because of the type of person I was, I thought that if I did everything she said, she might actually like me. But this only encouraged her to take advantage of me. Things like cleaning her side of our room, getting her drinks, making her food, doing any of the housework Mom asked her to do, and even giving her my pocket money were completely normal. But despite doing everything she said, she was always nasty, and not just to me. One of the worst memories I have of my sister is her screaming at my mom because she couldn't get the prom dress she wanted. I watched my mom try to explain that she didn't have the money to afford the dress she asked for, and that she'd have to get a cheaper one. Lilith blew up on my mom, telling her that they would have the money if Dad was still here and it was all her fault that he left, and she shouldn't suffer because Mom was too lazy to get a real job. This really struck a chord with me because even when I was younger, I always noticed how tired my mom was. She worked 2 jobs just to get us by, and for Lilith to act that way and say things like that really got to me. She made my mom cry that night, and I've never forgiven her for it. Sometime later, and my mom was dating this guy. We shall call him Matt. Matt was and still is great. He was really nice to all of us, bought us presents, made a point to get to know us, even took me and Lilith on separate days out so we could both spend some alone time with him, which always made me feel special. I was 13 when they got married and we moved in with him. Matt made quite a lot of money, so both Lilith and I now had separate bedrooms, and I could not have been happier. Enter Matt's son, our mastermind. We shall refer to him as Megamind. I had met Megamind a few times before my mom got married to his dad, but never really got to know him. He was older than me but younger than Lilith, so when we moved into his house, I was terrified that Mega would be like Lilith. However, I was completely wrong. Mega was and still is the best brother. He never made me feel like I was unwanted. He let me play on his consoles, got me into reading, helped me with my homework, even encouraged me to make friends, knowing how my sister's treatment of me affected my trust in people. Mega was the sibling I always wanted and never got to have, and Lilith just kind of faded into the background for a while. Then, some years later, Mega brought a friend home from university. His name shall be Nick. Nick and Mega were best friends. They did practically everything together and had the truest bromance of any 2 men that I've ever seen. There was evil lurking, evil that wished to break the bromance forever. The first time Lilith saw Nick, I swear there were stars in her eyes, and she had to capture this innocent soul into her trap by any means necessary, and poor Nick. Poor Nick. Despite both me and Mega telling him repeatedly what kind of person she was, Lilith entranced this innocent boy with her looks and her charms, and they soon started dating. Soon, whenever Nick would come to the house to hang out with Mega, Lilith would show up and drag him away, making it all about her. She started arguments with Mega about spending too much time with her boyfriend, and that he needed to stop and leave them alone, to which Mega always laughed in her face and told her, not too kindly, to fuck off. Mega wasn't like me. He didn't take any of her shit, and I deeply respected him for that. However, this evil demon was not used to being disrespected, and so she hatched a wicked plan. She started trying to separate Mega and Nick. If Nick came over to be with Mega, she would always make him feel guilty about not spending enough time with her. She would start fights with Mega and then act like the poor victim over text to Nick. Nick would then call Mega all upset and angry, and Mega would try to explain that Lilith was just trying to manipulate him. All of this I saw as a spectator. Mega would tell me every time Lilith did something sneaky to try and break his friendship with Nick, and I believed everything he said because he knew what kind of a person she was. And one day, Lilith and Mega had a massive fight. Our parents had gone on to a couple's weekend getaway and had left Lilith in charge since she was the oldest. I was about 15 at this time, while Mega was 19 and Lilith was 20. Because she was the one in charge, she got given the money we were supposed to use for food. But of course, Lilith took the money for herself and bought a bunch of shit just for her, including, I remember, a pair of gold high heel shoes. They were pretty, but we couldn't eat them. Mega blew up on Lilith, and Lilith shouted back she was older, better, and deserved it, blah blah blah. Mega got her parents on the phone and told them what happened, and they ripped into Lilith, telling her to give her pocket money to Mega so he could look after us and buy us food for the weekend. Lilith shouted and cried but eventually gave in. Never having successfully manipulated Matt in her life, she handed the money to Mega with a snarl, and spent the next few hours on the phone to Nick wailing about how we were both being mean to her while our parents were away, and could she please stay at his house so she wouldn't be bullied anymore. Nick came running and started screaming at Mega for, quote, taking Lilith's money and getting her into trouble. Meanwhile, Lilith stood behind Nick with a smug look on her face, while Mega was trying to explain. Nick then yells that Mega's been against their relationship from the beginning, and he didn't know what Mega's problem was, but if he was forcing him to choose between him and Lilith, he chose his girlfriend. Now, I know a lot of you will call Nick stupid, but don't. I knew how manipulative Lilith could be. She was a monster at making people feel sorry for her and getting them on her side, even when she was horrible to them, just like she did with me. That night, I had to listen to Mega cry for the first time since I knew him, and I had had enough. I knocked on his door, asked him if he was alright, we ordered pizza, and we started to plot. Mega was rather defeated by this point, but I told him that if his friendship with Nick meant anything, he had to get him away from that demon spawn before he lost his friend for good, and so we plotted. Lilith spent the entire weekend with Nick and came back all happy and smug, rubbing it in Mega's face that Nick had chosen her. But via our plan, Nick said nothing back, acted defeated, and let her talk. For the next few weeks, that's all she did. Whenever Nick came over to the house, she would spend time with him in her room, and when he'd leave, she'd prance around Mega, bragging about how much Nick loved her, and asking Mega snidely if he missed his little friend. Every time she did this, her focus was entirely on Mega. She never once looked at me, and that was her biggest mistake. Finally, the day of her 21st birthday had arrived. Nick and Mega hadn't spoken in weeks, and the few times Nick had gingerly tried to make things up with Mega, Lilith would walk in, screaming about how he had already chosen her, and that if he wanted to be friends with Mega again, their relationship was over. Nick would always look miserable, but would side with her nonetheless. Mega had had enough. The fact that Lilith was making his best friend so unhappy, purely for her own selfishness, snapped something in him, and he told me it was time to put our plan into action. This was where my part of our plan finally took center stage. For her 21st birthday, she'd arranged to have her party at the house since it was huge, and more than enough space for all of her university friends. Our parents had agreed, but only under the condition that there was no underage drinking and that both Mega and I were allowed to stay in the house. My sister reluctantly agreed, and thus the plan was in motion. On the morning of her birthday, I knocked on her bedroom door. She looked annoyed to see me and asked me snidely, "What do you want?" I innocently told her I'd had the best idea. I told her I wanted to record her for her 21st birthday. I wanted to record her getting ready with her friends, talking about her plans after leaving university, record all her friends at the party, then set up the recording on a big projector Matt had in his office so everyone could see it. This was before the time where smartphones were everywhere, so recording yourself was still something of a novelty, and I was using an old-fashioned camcorder I had got a few birthdays ago. Now, despite the fact that she did not like me, her wrath had been focused on Mega for so long that she most likely never saw me as a threat. And because of this, both her and her friends seemed to love the idea. I spent the entire morning with them, recording them all getting ready, putting on their makeup, and of course, introducing themselves to the camera. My sister was lapping it up. She looked into that camera's eye like she was a supermodel movie star, preening and talking loudly about her successful future and how amazing her birthday party was going to be. That day, I reverted back to my old role as a servant, fetched her and her friends drinks and food, and I made a grand show of complimenting all of them and telling them how amazing they looked on the camera, and that they could all be actresses someday. They were loving it. So the party starts, and my sister told me to stay out of the way. I told her innocently that it was no problem, that I'd just stay up in my room all night, edit the recordings, and come down to set up the camcorder when she was ready, because I wanted this night to be perfect for her. Satisfied with my answer, she left my room, and I did exactly what I said I'd do. I edited my recordings. A few hours later, and one of her friends came to my room and told me she was ready. I set up the projector in the large living room, connected it to Matt's computer, and started playing the recordings for all her guests to see. The first part of the recordings were exactly what I'd promised, my sister and her friends introducing themselves and laughing in her bedroom as they had been hours earlier. I looked at my sister, who seemed so satisfied that all the attention was on her. Then I looked at Mega, who was hiding in the corner of the room, and gave him a subtle thumbs up. Then the video started to change. It started to play clips of Lilith shouting at Mega, calling him names and taunting him about Nick. It started showing Lilith snidely telling Mega that Nick belonged to her and that she was just going to do her best to make Nick hate Mega so they would never be friends again. It even showed clips of Lilith bragging about all the lies she'd told Nick and how he was so gullible. Every single argument I had recorded without her knowledge, I'd edited into this video. Everyone in the party was watching silently as Lilith's true self was exposed in clip after clip. While Lilith stood there frozen, completely unable to comprehend what was going on, when she finally snapped out of it, she turned on me and started screaming, yelling at me, and asking me, "How could you do this?" I never said a word, I just smiled. When the recording stopped, Mega turned the lights on and everyone was staring at Lilith. Clearly having no defense, she let out a loud cry and stormed up to her room, slamming the door so hard everyone heard it. The next day, Mega told me Nick had apologized for everything, and that he was stupid to blindly believe everything she said. He even told me that Nick had thanked me specifically for helping him see what a monster my sister truly was. When my parents came home, both Mega and I were grounded for ruining Lilith's birthday and for using Matt's stuff without permission. But neither of us cared. Mega got his best friend back, and a few months later, Lilith moved out, since after seeing the recordings of her behavior, my parents were disgusted by her and they had absolutely no problems with showing it. Since she no longer had any leverage over anyone in the house, she packed her bags and moved to stay in one of her college dorms. I've never had any problems with my sister since, and to this day, Mega and I are close as two siblings can be, and always laugh about the time we defeated the demon and saved us all from its clutches. It's the little things, posted by user/GuyRick. I'm not exactly sure if this is ProRevenge, but here's a story for you all. I spent a lot of time in school, almost 12 years in college total to get 3 degrees. During that time, I would often get part-time jobs in order to make a little extra money for living expenses. From around 2008 to 2016, I worked seasonal and sometimes summers at a video game store where my parents lived. The stores themselves were your average GameStop stores, but the people who worked there were super nice and friendly. The main reason I started working there was because one of the managers overheard me mention to my brother, whom I would frequent the store with, that I wasn't going to buy a game that I had been looking forward to for a long time because money was getting really tight for me in graduate school. And she said that she would love to give me some seasonal work to help out. Say what you want about GameStop as a whole, but at this place, I never had a negative experience with any coworkers or bosses, as this area made sure to hire kind and hardworking people. Which is why when I would see customers treat them like crap, it would really upset me. I can't remember exactly when in my tenure of being a regular part-time seasonal worker this particular incident happened, but I do know it was at a time when I was working a shift with my manager and 2 other full-time workers, meaning that I was the only male employee working that day. I was reorganizing the shelves when I overheard a typical kind of incident. A group of boys, I think there were 4 of them, maybe around 12 to 13 years old, were trying to buy an M-rated game. I think it was some form of Grand Theft Auto, which one of the full-timers and the manager politely explained that they were not allowed to sell mature-rated games without seeing a valid state-issued ID that proved the buyer was over 17 years of age. Despite the pleading and the "come on, be cool" remarks, my coworkers stood their ground and refused the sale. The boys eventually relented, but they didn't actually leave the store. Instead, they started having a loud conversation among themselves, calling my coworkers bitches and cunts, among other horrible things. Now, I was a teenage boy once, and I was aware of what they were doing. They were doing that thing where they would try to one-up each other on how badass they could be by using the naughty words. I didn't like it when I was a kid, and I certainly wasn't enjoying this display now. Unfortunately, due to the nature of customer service and the fact that they were minors, there wasn't anything the manager or my coworkers could do without potentially causing a huge problem. The manager and coworkers eventually got so upset that they ended up taking their breaks early, which was fine with me, since I had worked there long enough that I could run a register and mind the store. The boys continued to taunt them with remarks and lewd gestures as they left the store and high-fiving each other on a job well done. By that point, I could feel my face becoming red with anger. And then a woman came into the store and she turned out to be the mom of one of the kids. I felt myself get a Grinch-like smile. I approached the mother and engaged in some polite introductory pleasantries. She turned out to be really nice. "I'm sorry to bring this to your attention, but did you know your son and his friends tried to buy an M-rated game?" The boys immediately stopped talking to each other. "No, I didn't." The mom looked at one of the boys with a disapproving look. "You know you're not supposed to play those games. We are going to have a long talk about this when we get home." "I'm afraid that's not all," I said. I saw the boys' eyes get wide as they realized what was about to happen, then laid out in excruciating detail every vile thing that they said, every horrible name that they called my coworkers. no censoring, and how they congratulated each other after they left for an impromptu break. The longer I went on, the more visibly angry the mother got, which made the boys more visibly tense. "I am very sorry that my son and his friends acted that way," said the mother in clipped words. She then turned to the boys and started laying into them. She was furious. She ordered all of them to follow her to the parking lot, and they were all leaving. In addition, she was going to have to talk to all their parents about this disgusting behavior, while loudly proclaiming to her son that he was grounded for the foreseeable future. None of the boys said a word as she berated them out of sight, and then a minute later out of earshot. About 30 minutes later, my coworkers came back and were delighted that the boys had left, and missed seeing or hearing the mother yelling at the group. I told them that the boys left, but my manager, who had known me for a couple of years, could tell I was being coy about the situation. I assured her that I did nothing against company policy, but that those boys would not be back for a long time. She seemed to accept that answer, and we went on with our workday. I didn't want to parade around the situation as a "look what I did for you" sort of thing, because I was sure that any one of them would have done the same thing if they had happened to be around. I never did see any of those boys come back to the store again. It's the little things, you know? How my class and I declared psychological warfare on a power-tripping teacher, also getting her fired in the process. Posted by user/Clemen11. I was told to post this after I replied to a different post on this subreddit with the story. It is a copy and paste. I'll add a TLDR at the bottom because it is long. She was replacing one of the best teachers I have ever had, Mr. J, as he was retiring. He was loved by everyone as the calmest teacher at school. He could tame the wildest of students too, which got him mad respect from everyone at school. He was also 1.99 meters tall and thin. Imagine a 45-year-old Del Potro, Argentinian tennis player who looks like a younger version of Mr. J. The replacement was the exact opposite of him though. Let's call her Cunt. Okay, you guys, for this video, I'm gonna call her Bunt because I don't want to use that word like a million times. You will see this as a very mild nickname in a bit. She was as short as she was wide, and her temper was a permanent power trip mixed with anger issues. She would throw the book at you figuratively as soon as she got the chance, putting the most severe sanctions on you for stuff that should not be punished. The first example of this, which also showed her true nature, came from when a classmate of mine was having lady issues. Won't go into detail, but I'll say she had to rush to the toilet. When she came back, the teacher had sanctioned her and sent her to the principal's office. Now our principal, Mrs. E, was such a sweet lady who also happened to be a biology teacher and a woman. So she understood my classmates' needs perfectly and negated the sanction. This only infuriated Bunt even more. As all power-tripping assholes with a position of authority do, she decided to take it out on us by constantly making us do unnecessary work outside of our curriculum and not letting us do as much as blow our noses because it was too loud and would disrupt the class. Basically, any tiny excuse she could get a hold of, she would stretch and force into being sanctionable offense. Naturally, the principal, Mrs. E, and the vice principal, Mr. L, started negating all her sanctions on site. The precepts at school were also growing tired of wasting printer ink on worthless pieces of paper. Now, a little sidetrack detailing. Me and a classmate, JC, were in the school band, so we could skip the Friday class with Bunt to go to band practice. So many events that happened on Friday are retellings, while all events that happened on the Tuesday class I witnessed. It was one of these Friday classes when the teacher decided that a classmate laughing at another classmate's joke triggered Bunt into giving every student a sanction, including me and JC, who weren't even in the class. When we go on lunch break and meet up with Pete, he tells us, "Hey, I'm pissed off, I got a sanction because 2 classmates made a joke. You did too, by the way." JC and I got pissed and went to talk to Mrs. E, who said, "Don't worry." The moment I read who the sanctions were coming from and what they were about, I threw the 23 of them into my trash bin. You were not sanctioned. That was a relief, but she had gained the distrust of the class. The classes from this moment on were tense, really tense, and just as the tension was peaking, something truly atrocious happened. Massive trigger warning, skip to the next paragraph if you were easily triggered. A classmate opened up about him being sexually abused by a family member. Won't give more details about this case because it's a really harsh story. Trigger warning ended. This situation caused a huge mess, including him being homeless temporarily because he didn't want to go back home to neither of his parents. so he ended up crashing at a couple of schoolmates' places while this got sorted out. As this situation is ongoing, Bunt mocked him for his traumatic experience as well as perfectly understandable behavioral mishaps, saying something along the lines of, "You clearly got issues," to his face and mocking him behind his back. This led to the best clapback I've heard from anyone ever. He answered, "I don't mock your hypothyroidism, so don't meddle with my issues." He got sent to Mrs. E's office to get sanctioned, as you might have guessed. Anyway, the whole class now went from tense but passive resistance to straight up guerrilla warfare, in which I took part of. She was scared of dogs, so hiding Bluetooth speakers under her desk and playing angry barks was a common thing. Welcoming her into class playing a song that goes the lines of, "Mrs. Cow, you sure do your job right," was also common. A full-on psychological war broke out, and she was outnumbered 23-1. This started getting maddening to her, which was good, as she had been abusing her power for 6 months at this point, and we were tired of it. As this was going on, the administration was starting to take notes on student reports of abuse of power from her, and when HR and the school counselor heard about how she mocked my classmate and friend for his traumatic experience, well, she didn't last too long after that. JC and I came back to class a Friday morning after band practice to see Pete smiling, almost jolting with joy, which was not a thing that could happen after Bunt's class. When asked why, he said, "Mr. L, the vice director came into class and took Bunt away. 40 minutes later, he came back and announced that she had been fired." Thanks to our reports, we cornered her, and thanks to her overuse of sanctions, she was not in good grace with the school. The teacher lasted under 8 months of giving class before being fired, and the school has been better off since. Alright everybody, that's it for today's video. If you made it this far, you are the real G here. I appreciate you so much. If you aren't subscribed and you like this kind of content, I would love to have you here. I upload every single day, except yesterday I forgot, I'm so sorry. And I will see you tomorrow. Bye!